Oh, hi, and welcome to episode 1 of the HSG Show. Now, this is something completely new on the channel, something which we haven't done before, not only in terms of the length of the episode, but also in the content. Now, usually on the channel, of course, I select and curate what subject matter is going to be in each video. But for these episodes, it's going to be you guys who decide what cars you want to see in each section of each episode. Now, the segments of the show are going to pretty much remain the same, but you guys can tell me in the comments below what cars you want to see in each segment, and as you watch through the show, that'll make more sense. Now, at the start of the show, where I'm talking now pretty much, we're hopefully from the second episode onwards going to have a Q&A section. Now, I didn't announce the show ahead of time to get questions, so obviously we don't have any for this episode. But hopefully, if we get enough from you guys to fill a segment from episode 2 onwards, we'll have a short Q&A section at the start of each episode of the HSG Show, and pretty much just ask me anything. Could be about the channel, could be about me, could be about cars, could be about anything. Just ask away, and then I'll select a few questions for the Q&A section of each show. Then we'll get into the main meat of the show, which is, of course, the cars. And so, since we don't have a Q&A section this time, let's get on with the show. So here we are in the first automotive segment of the show. And this segment of the show is called Rivals. And basically the purpose of this segment is to take two vehicles. In the case of this first episode, I've predetermined the two vehicles, but from every episode from here on out, it will be you guys telling me what two vehicles you want to see go head-to-head for a comparison test. Make sure you put that in the comments below. But for this first episode, I'm taking two vehicles which have always been natural rivals, and we're comparing them both in terms of raw spec, but also how they feel around the track, and of course, which one is faster. So, first of all, in terms of raw spec, how do these two cars compare? Now, the two models are, of course, the 2005 spec models from each respective company. From Mitsubishi, it's the Evo 9, and from Subaru, it's the Impreza WRX STI Spec C. So how do they compare? Well, both cars are, of course, rally-based vehicles. They're both front-engine, both all-wheel drive, both have 4 doors, 5 seats, both saloon-bodied. The Mitsubishi is actually a larger vehicle, interestingly, both in length and width. In length, it's 15mm longer than the Subaru, and it's also 30mm wider. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that being a bigger or smaller car is an advantage. Both have their advantages, so I'll let you guys decide which you prefer. What about the rest of the spec? Well, both are powered by a 2-litre engine. Both are 4-cylinder, of course, but the Subaru has a boxer or flat 4 compared to the Mitsubishi's inline 4. And those engines, when fully tuned, produce, in the case of the Mitsubishi, which is the more powerful of the two, 589 horsepower compared to the Subaru's 571. But as far as torque, the Subaru is actually the superior of the two, with 541 pound-feet compared to 501 from the Mitsubishi. Now, when fully tuned, the Mitsubishi has a lower PP at 573, whereas the Subaru sits at 581. And the Subaru is, interestingly, also lighter at 1,138 kilos compared to the Mitsubishi's 1,155. However, despite the fact that the Subaru is lighter, the Mitsubishi still has the superior power-to-weight ratio at 510 horsepower per tonne compared to the Subaru's 502. And finally, in terms of price, the Mitsubishi has the slight edge there as well at 35,700 credits compared to the Subaru's 38,220. So overall, the two cars have very similar specs. Each one has its advantage over the other. Subaru's lighter, Mitsubishi's more powerful, etc. But now let's take them out to the track, which in this case is going to be Suzuka, to see how they compare in driving style, driving feel, and of course, which one is faster. Now, as soon as you get to the first corner in the Impreza, you can feel that the car is a lot of fun. It has lots of personality, and although it's definitely a fast machine, it does feel like it leaves room to have fun while being fast. Now, both of these vehicles ran an under 2-minute lap, so they are still both very well matched. But of the two, the Subaru does definitely feel more fun and more relaxed, and I would say more beginner-friendly as well. Now, I'll get to that more when we take out the Mitsubishi, but for now the Subaru is very fun, as we said. It has enough grip to give you a great lap time, but not so much that it feels like you're constantly fighting understeer. The handling on the Subaru is actually very, very good. It's perfectly weighted, the turn-in is great, there's a looseness to the steering which allows you to have a confidence in the car's ability, but also a lot of fun and a lot of variation in driving style. There's no right way of driving an Impreza. You can just throw it around the track whatever way you want, and it will give you a great lap. Now, in terms of pure straight line performance, the cars are so similar they pretty much break even. Acceleration times are very similar between the two, with the slight low end edge going to the Subaru for its torque, whereas the slight top end edge going to generally the Evo because of its higher power. In terms of top end performance, again, they're so similar. Both cars do around 230 miles per hour and have very similar draft potential, obviously dependent on tuning. So overall, the Subaru is definitely the more fun of the two and the more beginner friendly. Let's now compare that to the Mitsubishi. Now, from the moment that you start driving the Evo, you can instantly feel that it is a completely different animal to the Impreza. As we said, the Impreza has flair, it has room for personal variation, it's fun. The Evo has none of that. Now, it's certainly not boring to drive, but it's much more focused, much more raw, much more aggressive, but at the same time emotionless compared to the Impreza. It is designed for one thing: victory. Now, it's certainly not a difficult car to drive. It's very fun to drive. There's plenty of grip, it's fast, the power is more than enough to get the job done, but not so much that it's difficult to drive, and it's still a pretty beginner-friendly car. The Impreza, though, is more so in that regard. The facts are, though, that in terms of pure performance on this track, the Evo is the quicker of the two by 0.1 of a second. So both cars are capable of under 2-minute laps, but the Evo, with of course me driving, is the quicker of the two. Now, that may well change on different tracks with different drivers, but that's the outcome of this test. Overall then, the Lancer is, in my opinion, a more focused, professional feeling machine, which is just designed for victory, whereas the Impreza feels more beginner friendly, is overall more forgiving, and I would say more fun, especially in terms of handling. And in terms of pure straight line performance, we already said they pretty much break even. So the Evo is faster, but the Impreza is more fun. Now, what would you like to see in the next part of Rivals? Make sure to put it in the comments below. And finally, let's compare the raw overall specs, including the lap of the two cars, to see which one wins. How then do the two cars compare? Well, they both have 2-litre 4-cylinder engines, so it's a wash for points there. The Subaru, though, has a higher PP at 581 compared to the Mitsubishi's 573, whereas the Mitsubishi has the superior power at 589 horsepower to the Subaru's 571. The Subaru, though, has more torque at 541 pound-feet to the Mitsubishi's 501, and is also lighter at 1,138 kilos
compared to the Mitsubishi's 1155. The Mitsubishi though does have the superior power to weight ratio at 510 horsepower per tonne compared to the Impreza's 502. Now although, as I mentioned before, the Evo is both longer and wider than the Impreza, both have their merits, so again I'm awarding them both points in those regards. The Evo though does edge ahead of the Impreza for price as well, with a price of 35,700 credits to the Impreza's 38,220. And the final point also goes to the Evo for being the faster of our two models on our track test. Overall then, our winner is the Evo 9 with a total points of 8 to a very close second of 7 for the Subaru. So that's it for this instalment of Rivals. What do you guys want to see go up head to head next time? Let me know in the comments below. And now, on with the show.
Welcome then to the first tuning section of the show, and this section of the show is called Track Tune of the Month. Now under normal circumstances, from episode 2 onwards, it's going to be you guys deciding what car at what PP you want to see in this segment. Now you need to bear in mind when you're selecting the car that you want to see that this section of the show is for a handling based PP specific tune. So when you're suggesting the car that you want to see, be sure to bear in mind that it's going to be a handling tune, not a speed tune, and that it needs to be a specific car at a specific PP level, and then I will build that car and put it in the next episode. But for this inaugural episode, obviously I've had to choose the cars myself because I didn't announce this ahead of time, and the car in question is the Nissan Micra, or the March as it's called in the game, and it's a 475 pp handling based track tune, and we're taking it around the Nürburgring Ring, because what better place than that. Now this car of course was featured in the final episode of the Dark series, so any of you guys who followed that will know just how good this car is, but let's get straight into it. So, as we said, this is a handling based tune, but as it happens it's pretty quick for its PP in a straight line as well, but to be honest that's just a byproduct of the tune. So you want your racing soft tyres. For suspension we've got the ride height on 100 front and rear, springs we've increased to 550 and 5, dampers and anti-roll to 4, neutral camber and tow. For the gearbox we want an auto setting of 180, then we've rounded off the individual gears to 2390, 1560, 1100, 830 and 660 with a final drive of 4. For the diff we've got the lowest initial torque, highest acceleration and lowest braking sensitivity. As far as power, pretty much just fit everything. You want the high RPM turbo. You can fit nitrous of course if you want to, but most people don't use it on a track car really. And we do have an oil change. And as far as weight, you want all 3 of your weight loss options, and then we've got a 32 kilo ballast which we've put all the way to the back, which brings us slightly closer to a perfect 50-50 split, and also brings us perfectly down to 475 pp. So that's the tune. Now let's see how it drives. The great thing overall with this tune on this particular car is that not only is it hugely competitive and extremely fast, not only around corners but also in a straight line, but it's also just really fun to drive. Plus, it's the kind of car which nobody expects to be as competitive as it is, so you've got that huge added pride factor when you win a race in essentially a jelly bean with an engine. Nobody expects this car to be as quick as it is, and it's brilliant. It's cheap, it's fast, it's fun, and it's easy to drive. And to top that off, it's understated. It's pretty much the perfect undercover track car. So, I hope you guys who decide to use this tune find it helpful and fun. And that's it for what I'm deciding for this part of the show. Next time, you guys are deciding what you want to see in this segment of the show. So, tell me in the comments below, what car and at what PP do you want to see a tune for in the next episode? So now, on with the show. Welcome then to our PP specific top end tune of the month. And basically what this segment of the show is for is it's a PP specific track tune, but whereas the tune that we featured before for the Micra is more of a handling or a grip tune, this is specifically for a vehicle which you can use on a track which requires more straight line performance. So it's not a top speed tune or a drag tune, it is still for circuit racing, but it's for tracks that require more straight line power and top speed to really do well, such as Monza or Lasarte for instance. And for this inaugural episode I've chosen to feature a 525 pp tune for the Mazda RX-7. Now this is the premium model. It should work pretty much the same on any of the FD RX-7s. There is of course a newer model which is also premium, but I've chosen to go for this particular model. So first of all I'll show you of course the tune for the car, and then we'll take it out to the track to see how it performs. So for the tune on this particular model we've got racing soft tyres. For the brakes we've lowered the rear to 4, increased the front to 6. For ride height we've got that on 90 front and rear. Springs on 550 and 6. Dampers we've actually left on 3, and one of the reasons for that is because on tracks such as Lasarte, where it's extremely bumpy at high speed, you actually don't want the car to be too stiff, because you need the dampers to absorb the bumps in the road. Anti-roll we've got on 5, camber on 2.5 to assist with the cornering, neutral toe of course. For the gearbox you want an auto setting of 180, then for the individual gears we've got 3, 2.1, 1540, 1190, 960 and 800 with a final drive of 3.6. For the diff we've got the lowest initial torque, highest acceleration and lowest braking sensitivity. We do have an oil change on this one, and then you want your stage 3 engine tune, your intake tuning and your high RPM turbo, and then reduce the power down to 99.1. And for your weight loss you want to leave all 3 standard and give it a 200 kilo ballast, which we've put 5% towards the front of the car to give us just a little bit less weight over the front, which improves the handling and reduces wheel spin because you've got more weight over the rear wheels. And also it's still not a heavy car even with the ballast, and that brings us nicely to 525 pp. So now let's see how it goes around the track. Now there are of course perhaps more obvious choices to go for top end lower PP tunes, such as the OP Mazda RX 500 or other vehicles such as that most people know by now are pretty good for low PP speed, or such as vehicles like the Dome Zero as well. But this tune is for people who don't want to use what everybody else uses but still wants a vehicle which is competitive. And this car certainly is competitive. It can lap Lasarte even with the chicanes in around 4 minutes, which, well, it's actually just over 4 minutes. It's 4 minutes and a couple of seconds. So for the PP, and considering that that is with the chicanes, that's pretty impressive for a road car and at the 525 pp level. Now the RX-7 can usually be a bit tail happy, but I have to say this one handles really, really well because of having the extra ballast to ground the rear end. And it's extremely fast. It may only have 520-ish horsepower, but from that it goes over 200 miles per hour if you've got a straight long enough. With the chicanes, not quite higher than 200, but obviously with NOS you can easily get up around that region. It's got plenty of draft potential if you do need it, and the handling overall and the drivability is very, very good. It's very easy to drive, it's easy to drive fast, and it will give you fast laps on high-speed biased tracks such as Lasarte of course, but also Monza, high-speed ring perhaps, and tracks such as that. So for those of you guys who do choose to use this tune, I hope you find it both fun and of course competitive. And that's it for my selection of this tune, but what do you want to see for a top-end tune in the next episode? Tell me the car and the PP below and I will build a top-end tune for it in the next episode of the HSG Show. But now, let's go on to the next part of the show. Welcome then to the section of the show called Honourable Mention of the Month. And basically, the purpose of this segment is to select one vehicle in particular from any category of driving, a vehicle which doesn't see anywhere near as much use as it deserves on GT6 from most people, but a car which has certain advantages or secret merits that many people don't realise it's good at. And for this inaugural episode, the honourable mention of the month is the Audi V16 Type C Streamliner. Now this car is kind of an oddball car compared to many of the other vehicles in the game. It's actually the oldest car in the game, from 1937. And it's also one of the best straight-line performance cars in the game. But many people don't give this car the credit that it is due. Many people think it's a difficult car to drive, or that the performance perhaps just isn't worth using. But this car has certain very, very good advantages and merits. Now there are three in particular. One is the price. For a car of its age, its historical importance, and its performance, you'd expect it to be ridiculously expensive, considering the price of many of the other classics. But actually, this car only costs a remarkable 500,000 credits, which is ridiculously cheap for how good it is. The second thing that's great about it is how fast it is for its power. Now, fully tuned, the 6-litre V16 engine puts out 743 horsepower. But from that 743 horsepower, this car does close to 300 miles per hour without NOS or slipstream. And you'd be hard-pressed to find any other vehicle in that power bracket that can give you that kind of performance. So that's a great advantage of using this car, especially in power-restricted races. The third advantage, and this is one which many people don't realise, is its endurance potential on Special Stage Route X. This car has the best top-speed fuel economy of any exotic vehicle on Special Stage Route X. Now obviously that's dependent on how fast the fuel and tyre depletion is set, but this car is capable of running up to 5 or even 6 laps on a tank of fuel, and I've done that and won races using this car by a significant margin. Sometimes the best part of a lap I've had a victory with in this car in endurance races. So if you have not bought this car, I would strongly recommend that you do so, because it's one of the best specialist vehicles in the game. And that's it for this honourable mention of the month. And now, on with the show. So welcome to the part of the show where we create PP-specific top speed tunes. Now in this inaugural episode I've chosen the cars that we're going to do, but from here on it's you guys who are going to be suggesting, hopefully in the comments below, what car and at what PP you want me to do a top speed tune for. And we're going to probably be doing 2 of these in each episode, so you can suggest literally any vehicle for any PP. Obviously it has to be a PP that that car can actually reach, low or high, and it has to obviously be a vehicle that can be tuned, otherwise it's pointless, obviously. So for this first of our 2 PP specific top speed tunes, I chose a vehicle which is completely underappreciated in this regard. It's one of the best sleeper cars in the game, and it's genuinely hugely competitive, far more so than you'd ever imagine. It is, of course, the Isuzu Piazza. Not a particularly exciting looking car, it's very cheap to buy, and this particular top speed tune, which is obviously for ideally Special Stage Route X racing, is for 450 pp. Now you're probably thinking, why on earth am I doing a 450 pp tune for Special Stage Route X. Surely it's going to be slow. Well, that's the thing, because this Isuzu can do almost 200 miles per hour without NOS or draft at the 450 pp level, which is absolutely crazy when you really think about it. So, first of all, I'll show you obviously the mechanical setup of how to get the car to achieve that speed and, as far as I'm aware, completely dominate that PP category. And then, obviously, we'll take it out on the track to show you what it can do. So there is a very specific way that you need to set up this car in order to get the speed out of it. And essentially it's a way of tricking the game's PP system into allowing more power into the PP than it would usually allow. So you want your racing soft tyres to get the best speed out of the car. Ride height we've got on 120 front and rear, which sounds pretty high, but that's actually not that high at all for this car. Springs we've got on 650 and 4. Dampers to 4, anti-roll on 5, camber on 2, and neutral toe as always. For the gearbox, you want an auto setting of 180. Then we've rounded off the individual gears to 2760, 1880, 1380, 1070, 860, and 720 with a final drive of 3.4. For the diff, lowest initial torque, highest acceleration, and lowest braking. Now for the power, we do have an oil change. Then you want your stage 3 engine tune, your race exhaust, manifold, cat, and high RPM turbo. Then reduce your power down by 0.1 to 99.9. Obviously I would recommend having NOS, even though I haven't fitted it on this one. You want to leave all of the weight exactly as it is and add a 197 kilo ballast and then put that all the way to the front of the car. Because as you can see, if you change that by even 0.1, it takes you up out of the 450 pp category. But by adding this weight and putting it all the way to the front, you can trick the game, as it were, into lowering the pp, which then allows you to have far more power than you'd ever expect to have at this pp level. As you can see, 320 horsepower is a lot for a 450 pp car, and even with the full ballast, or almost a full ballast, it's still not a heavy car. So, that's it for the tune setup. Now let's take it out to the track to see how it performs. Now, this isn't the kind of car that I'm suggesting you should own and use all the time, obviously, because its range of effectiveness is at a very specific level. And obviously up against vehicles like the Viper, the Veyron, etc., it doesn't stand a chance, and it's not impressive compared to those cars. However, at the 450 pp level, the performance on this car is virtually unbeatable. Now, there may be other 450 pp vehicles which could give this car a run for its money, but there aren't very many. There are possibly one or two that I could maybe think of, but in general I think this is pretty much the best car you can get for top speed at the 450 pp level. Now, obviously we have not fitted NOS, but with NOS, the acceleration as well is really good. I mean, the acceleration's not bad anyway for a 450 pp car. And the cruising speed, as I said, is almost 200 miles per hour. It's actually about 196 it cruises at on its own, which is extremely fast, both for the power and even more so for the PP. I mean, there are literally racing cars which can't keep up with that, with much more power and a much higher PP. So it's an amazing little car. It's rear-wheel drive as well, so the handling doesn't weave at all over the road like a front-wheel drive car could. Off the line, it launches really well, again, because of having the rear-wheel drive. And as far as draft potential, let's face it, with this car at this PP level, there's not going to be many cars in front of you, so you don't really need that much draft potential. But there is a little bit of draft potential, around 200 or 300 RPM, so you should be able to slipstream it up to maybe 205, 210, possibly a little bit more. Now, you can lower the final drive a little bit more if you do, for some reason, need a little bit more draft, but obviously that will affect your cruising speed. But overall, this car is hugely competitive at this PP level. And like I said, it's not the kind of car which I'd recommend using all the time. Obviously, it doesn't work all the time against bigger, more powerful rivals, but in its niche, it is a monster. And it's the kind of car which, even if you don't like it, I would recommend buying it and fitting this tune, because you can guarantee someday you will enter a lobby, they'll limit it to 450 pp, and then you can pull out this monster and absolutely annihilate the room. You might actually end up getting kicked for being too quick though, so that's the only payoff. So, obviously, I hope you guys find this tune setup fun, and it's definitely competitive. And as I said, this is the only time that I'm going to pick this tune. So next time, it's you guys who are deciding what car and at what PP you want to see a PP specific Special Stage Route X tune. So let me know in the comments below. And now let's go to the second of our 2 PP specific top speed tunes. So here is the second of our 2 PP specific top speed tunes in this episode. Now, as with the previous top speed tune, the next episode's PP specific top speed tune will be decided by you guys. So make sure you go into the comments below and post both the car and the PP that you would like to see a top speed tune for. But in this initial episode, the vehicle which I've chosen for our second top speed tune is another extremely underappreciated vehicle, the Jaguar XFR. Now, this is kind of an unusual vehicle in that despite being a newer model, for some reason it's still not a premium car, which is very strange. I really do not understand why they did that. But they did. So there you go. But this car we're building a 575 pp tune for, and at that pp level it is an extremely competitive model with a brilliant top speed, pretty strong acceleration, and tons of draft potential. So, as with the last top speed tune, I'll show you first of all, of course, the tune, and then we'll take it out on the track to see how it performs. Now, as with the Isuzu top speed tune, the real trick of this tune is tricking the game into thinking that the car isn't as good as it actually is, and the way you do that is with careful distribution and addition of weight. Because although the weight of the vehicle does make a difference to acceleration, it doesn't really affect top speed that much, so you can actually drastically reduce your PP whilst retaining pretty much the same top-end performance. So, you want your racing soft tyres for the best effect. I've changed the brake balance to 6 on the front, 4 on the rear. Ride height we've got on 100, front and rear. Springs we've rounded off to 10 and 8. Dampers to 4. Anti-roll quite high on 6. Camber on 2.5. Neutral toe as always. For the gearbox you want the highest possible auto setting. Then for the individual gears you want 2680, 1800, 1200, 875, 675 and 550 with a final drive of 3.9. For the diff we've got the lowest initial torque, highest acceleration and lowest braking sensitivity. You want all of your power upgrades, and I would recommend using NOS. You want your stage 2 weight reduction and the window weight reduction, and then a 195 kilo ballast which you put all the way to the front of the car, which allows you to have the full 800 horsepower but only in the 575 pp category. So that's it for the tune of this car. Now let's take it out to the track to see what it can do. Now, as with the Isuzu Piazza, this is a specialist tune. It's not designed to take on vehicles that are, say, 650 pp or 700 pp or 1000 horsepower. It's designed for a specific niche, which is the 575 pp level. Now, some people do actually race fairly regularly at the 575 pp top speed class. And although I'm not claiming that this car is necessarily the absolute fastest vehicle that you can get at this level, because there are always obscure vehicles which can get those kind of speeds, it is a very strong, very competitive car at this level. It has a cruising speed of over 250 miles per hour, which is very good for the PP, and it has tons of draft potential. Now with NOS you can cruise at over 270, it does over 250 on its own, over 270 with NOS, and with draft, thanks to having over 1000 RPM of draft potential, you can easily slipstream this car up to 290 or even over 300, which is impressive for a heavy vehicle. Now the acceleration isn't necessarily class leading because of its weight, but it's no slouch. It's the kind of car which may be the slowest off the line, but you'll catch up your opponents pretty quick for top speed. So I'm not necessarily saying, as I said, that this is the fastest car you can get at this level, but it is certainly a very competitive model at the 575 pp mark. The only downside to the car really is that it costs 120 grand, which is pretty expensive, but I would recommend buying this car for the same reason as the Piazza, just to keep in your garage for those times when you need a specialist vehicle like that. And for this, it's very, very good and highly underappreciated. So as with the Piazza, let me know in the comments below what car and at what PP you want to see a specific top speed tune for next time. And that brings us to the end of the show. So I hope you've enjoyed yourself, hope you didn't find it too boring, and make sure that in the comments below you lay out all the stuff that you can think of that you want to see in the various categories of the show in the next episode, which will be on the 1st of next month. And thanks for watching.